So my name is Kyle Crowley. I'm a recovering drug addict. I was born in Brantford, Ontario. I grew up in a home with my father and grandfather. I always got what I wanted growing up as an only child. Both my dad and my grandfather raised me. My father owned his own construction business. When my father would work, my grandfather would look after me. As I started getting a little bit older, I then went to school. The school was right across the street from my house. It was called Princess Elizabeth. How lucky I was to have my first school right across the street from my house. When I was in school, I always wanted to be noticed, or the kid who always got attention from other people in the class. My grades were never the best, but when it came to gym class, I was always invested. Growing up, I played hockey, baseball, soccer, and lacrosse, and even football. I started school. I was a bigger person, meaning I was fat and out of shape. I always loved food, but mostly bread when my papa would take me to the market on Saturday mornings. I was liked by many people growing up, but also the bullies were my worst nightmare. I remember every day I would be scared to go to school because I knew when I would get picked on about my weight, they would always call me names, and yes, I would be very emotional about my weight. I remember many times getting pushed around in front of other kids, and it was like nobody could do anything to help me. And I was a very happy person, but also very scared to be at school around foes. I think it was because I was such a nice person. Felt like I was the only one that got bullied really bad. All this happened throughout grades 3 to 8. Once it was time to go on to high school, it felt like I would be able to have a new start at this whole school thing. Keeping in mind, I never really liked school because I didn't feel safe there. As I entered my first day of high school, there were so many people I just wanted to be friends with. From grades 9 to 10, I was a very preppy kid and hung out with all the good people. Let's call it that. And then something in me wanted to try and change and be a cool kid, not to be myself. I started to hang out with a bad crowd once I got into grade 10. The parties happened, drinking and doing drugs. I had many late nights puking, saying things to people I know I shouldn't have. Also, when I mixed the two together, I became a very violent person. Always wanted to fight. I had many relationships with great people I couldn't stay in a relationship also though because of my addiction. It was always my first priority. I ended up hanging around drug dealers by the time I was 17, just so I wouldn't have to go searching for the drugs, and I knew that they only wanted me for the money, not the friendships. I always had a people pleaser mentality growing up, and I would do anything to make the other person happy and not care about myself. Also too, growing up, I had a sex addiction, and I've had a sex addiction since I was 8 years old, and that's always been a very, very hard thing to cope with. And you know, there's always a person in me that wants to try and change that, and I can only change that for myself, and I work on that every day. It seemed like growing through high school and stuff like that, from grades 10 to 12, it got very, very dark for me. Like I said, it was always being around drugs and being around the parties. It was always the wants and the needs. I wasn't prioritizing my own life, and I was living a life that I didn't want to live for so long. I also think that, you know, if I could take everything back for what I had done to, you know, where I'm at now, I would definitely do it in a heartbeat. I also remember being very ungrateful for the things that I had had in my life. You know, my father has done so much for me, and I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for my father. He never ever left my side through through all my troubles, through all my problems, and you know, I continue to just do him wrong. I've made him so upset and mad. I've had things done to him that, you know, I would never have wanted done to myself, but my addiction had, you know, taken over fully in that aspect. Also too, in my active addiction, like I said, I became a very violent person. You know, I was always looking for fights, always looking to be somebody I wasn't, but most of all, it was that self-centered, self-sabotaging person. I sit here today and I look back and I reflect on the things that I have done in my life and the person that, you know, I'm becoming today. Life today is completely changed. You know, I get up and I have a daily routine. Go to work, go to the gym, check on my family, stay healthy. Very invested on having peace in my life. Peace is a very huge part of my life. I mean, as soon as, you know, like chaos enters my life, it's just, I can't control it. I ended up last year, January 14th is my clean date. I ended up checking into rehab. I still remember, that day that I had to go to rehab. My dad had drove me. It was in Hamilton, and it's called the Wayside House in Hamilton. And I remember driving there, and I'm telling him, I'm just like, I just want you to turn this truck around. Like, I'm not ready. And I'm not turning this truck around. You're getting held. And that's when, once I finally showed up to there and I checked in, and, I was detoxing there. Um, and it took a couple days, but I was finally ready to just surrender to my addiction in that mentality, because I was so fed up with, the same cycle, man, the being broke, being depressed, always just negative about things, not wanting to, hold myself accountable, not be a better person. I can just I can just even feel, you know, life today. I have so much weight off of my shoulders. I have so much gratitude towards my recovery, my life, my family. I have family that lets me back in their life now, That's I've hurt, I've said some pretty rude things, and I've done some pretty bad things to them, and they've allowed me to come back into their life out of love, and you know how much they actually can support for me. And I wasn't able to actually recognize that because I was so far gone for so long. And I was always just looking at, I was always looking at the wrongs and not, what's right for me and what's right for my family. I was so invested in just getting the drugs and not being who I want to be. And today I sit here and I am who I want to be. I I want to be a healthy person. I want to give back to the community when I can. I want to spread the message of recovery. I want to help others too. That's a big thing in my life. I want to help other people get better. That's what makes me happy, because I know where I was, how beat down I was, and how hurt I was. I have also abandonment issues. I lost my mom at a very young age. I never had a mom in my life, and that's a very tough thing. I grew up, like I said, with two men, and I never had that mom figure, and it just feels like, yeah, I was definitely abandoned. It feels like she was an alcoholic, and I, there's just something in me that always wondered if, like, why I was here, and the what ifs, and that played a big part into my addiction, and but I had to let that go, and like, she's in a better place, rest in peace. But I had to continue to move forward with my life and not live in that sorrow or the pity party. And life has to keep moving forward. I find I couldn't sit around no more and just wait for things to be just given to me. Just wait around. I would always just wait, thinking we're just gonna get better, and I wouldn't have to invest any time into myself or put the work in. I just think everything was just gonna be just handed to me on a silver platter. I've come to realize that's not like helped, and it's not gonna be that way. I've worked very hard this past year and a half now on myself to get myself back to where I want to be, achieving the goals that I want to do. I can set out to do things that I know I can achieve and can accomplish. Realistic goals are very huge for me. I don't tend to set up for failure anymore. But anytime that in the past I would set these unrealistic goals that I knew that I'd never achieve, but at the same time I wouldn't have the patience. I wouldn't want to. Basically, yeah, I just wouldn't want to believe in that process of, okay, this is gonna work, but it's gonna take time, because the addict in me was like, no, I want what I want and I want it now, and that's huge for, like, you know an addict in themselves to realize that we have to get out of that mentality of, it's not just gonna happen overnight. there's a slogan that sits in my head, and I didn't realize it. It's recovery doesn't happen overnight, and that's so true because I remember, I was 3 weeks into my treatment, and yeah, I started feeling healthier, but I wasn't understanding like the spirituality of the things. I wasn't understanding like, you know, how it feels to be physically strong again, having, the mental aspect of things and seeing, a future for myself. As time went on, it was like I should be at 6 months when I'm only at 3 weeks clean, and I couldn't grasp on why I didn't have what I didn't have at that time, but it was because I had a lack of patience. I am very grateful for, the struggles that I went through. It's made me a stronger person today, and, the things that did happen to me when I was younger, it's, it's crazy because I know that if the things that I didn't go through when I was younger didn't happen to me, I know I wouldn't be the man I am today. I stand here strong. I did not want to be alive. I just felt like I didn't deserve to live. I was a very, very sick person, and I just believe that, it was just easier if I just wasn't here anymore, and the troubles I was putting myself and my family and friends in, it just felt a lot easier if I would have just killed myself. My grandpa and my grandma also took care of me very much so when I was younger. My dad spent a lot of his time as he has his own construction company, and my grandma took care of me, made me food. They had a beautiful home and a lot of great memories with my grandma. I'm so grateful for her. I just find, I don't have time to restart again. I don't ever think about going back to the lifestyle I lived. I cannot imagine having to restart and never go back to drinking and doing drugs and numbing my emotions and lying, cheating, and stealing to have that way of life. My name is Kyle Crowley, and I'm a recovering drug addict.